Well, good morning, Philly. So I actually have a question for you. How many of you actually know your neighbors? You know their names, you know what they do, you know their general story? Okay, cool. Well, for those of you who did not, I hope that by the end of this presentation that I would have encouraged you to get to know your neighbors, but also become brand ambassadors for Pedal the Porch. So what is Pedal the Porch? Pedal the Porch is a neighborhood bike ride that includes stops where residents use their front porch as a stage to tell their story. Now, I'd like to put a pin in that because I'd like to draw your attention to the brochures. So in the brochure, it gives us this title that's above my name, How Bicycles and Storytelling Can Tackle Gentrification. Gentrification is a problem that Pedal the Porch does not solve, period. I want to be clear with you about what Pedal the Porch is not so that we can focus on what Pedal the Porch is. And what Pedal the Porch is that it offers, it lowers the barrier of connection between neighbors, it strengthens the social fabric of communities, it challenges limited narratives of place, and it preserves history through storytelling. Okay? So this is what Pedal the Porch is. And these points will be pulled out throughout the presentation. So now that you know what Pedal the Porch is, I'd like to give you context in which Pedal the Porch was created. So I take you back to my hometown of Detroit, Michigan. Yeah, Detroit, woohoo! Detroit in the house. So Detroit has a very interesting history, right? At its peak in the 1950s, we had a population of 1.8 million people. And over a 60-year period, the population has declined to 670,000 people. Now, there are a number of reasons why there was a decrease in population, which I would not enumerate in this particular presentation. But what I will say is that with the decrease in population, it created high vacancy. The thing about high vacancy is that people will get really creative on how they see space in their city. So for example, they'll turn a vacant lot into a community garden, or they will repurpose a theater into a garage. I don't know why you would do that, but they did that. Or they will convert a 2,200 square foot bank into a living quarters, right? Which is what these folks did. Now, with space, right, open space, right, you just need creativity, ingenuity, and a little bit of cash in order to kind of bring your vision to pass. Because the world is your oyster, and Detroit is a blank slate, right? No, actually. So what these folks did was they saw an opportunity, and they built something very interesting, right? So one day, I was scrolling through my Facebook newsfeed, and I came across this article. It reads, West Corktown creating Detroit's newest neighborhood. And I thought to myself, in a city as old as Detroit, how do you just create a new neighborhood? And so when I clicked on the link, it described the boundaries of my neighborhood. This place, the place where I actually rode my bike up and down the street, where I actually went to that school. Core City was the name of my neighborhood. And so basically the folks who purchased this bank were calling Core City by a different name. So I was really upset, and I took to Facebook, and I'm like, who are these people, and why are they trying to Columbus my neighborhood? And because that's essentially what they did. It wasn't until the following year that I won a fellowship that took me to Toronto, where I met these wonderful people, where among many things we learned the power of community storytelling. And it was here that I developed an idea to challenge like that blank slate narrative, but then also to preserve the historical identity of my community. So when I came back home to Detroit, I started to interview folks in my community, my neighbors. And I first asked them if they knew of this rebrand effort, and of course they said no, that this was something that was taking place in their neighborhood but had no knowledge of. But I also wanted to see who are the neighborhood anchors, who are the natural storytellers. And I kept having conversations with people for several weeks. And then finally, on August 13th, 2016, these folks assembled to participate in Core City Stories, where they are able to ride to 4 different porches to hear 4 different stories. One of the storytellers was Miss Parnell, right here on your left. Miss Parnell lives on Humboldt Street, and she told a story about how highly dense her neighborhood was, and that the block was full of houses. And each house, there were at least 5 to 10 kids that lived there. So when she was a kid going to school, every morning there would be a mass exodus of kids leaving the house, walking to the neighborhood school. And at the end of the day, at the bell ring, those same kids would come back home. And so it was like a sight to see, right? But when we arrived to Mrs. Parnell's house, this is kind of what we saw, right? So you have very few homes and a lot of open land. And even though it's very empty, her pride in her community never deceased, right? Like she remained, her pride remained. She said for every house, for every family that left and every house that was demolished, she started to feel a little bit of a social isolation, right? So for the neighbor that she was able to go and say, hey, could I borrow some sugar? Or hey, can you watch my house while I'm gone? Or hey, do you have any job connections? Those resources weren't there for her, right? But again, it didn't lessen her pride in her community. In fact, when she showed up for her photo shoot, she wore this t-shirt, and on the t-shirt it says 100% Humboldtian, right? And she said that after the event, that she will wear this shirt more often to demonstrate her renewed sense of pride in her community. And I was like, that's more than I could ask for. Rochelle Riley, who is a columnist for the Detroit Free Press, wrote an article about the experience, and she really lifted our platform, but then also launched a citywide conversation about how rebranding the neighborhood is not a neighborly thing to do. Right, like go figure. But also, the emails started coming in. They're like, Cornetta, you gotta have a bike ride like this in our community. And I had to think about it. And I did, and I applied to the Night Cities Challenge and won a $30,000 grant to host Pedal to Porch, to launch Pedal to Porch and host it in neighborhoods in Detroit. So I had to think about, like, operationalize what I did in Core City. And so I developed and realized that Pedal to Porch is more than just an event, it is a process, right? Where we develop meaningful, non-transactional relationships with people, where we recruit residents to lead the process. So we find a volunteer coordinator, a storyteller coordinator, an event planner, a project manager, and we pay them stipends for their time. We launch a door-to-door campaign because we know that the digital divide in America is still very real. And if you want to invite people to come to an event, it can't all be online. We facilitate a storytelling workshop to give people confidence to tell their story. We offer free bike rentals through partnerships with different biking groups. And then we also document, share, and archive the stories so that they live beyond the day that they were told. And of course, all these things were finalized in our toolkit, which has a timeline, sample budget, and then also meeting agendas. So we hosted in 8 different communities since 2016. Harper Woods was the first city outside of Detroit where the municipality was looking to engage their residents in a way they hadn't before. We also went to Charlotte, North Carolina, where we were able to work with B-Cycle as well as Cycling Without Age. So they were kind of like the boots on the ground for recruiting all of the volunteers, for attracting people to the event, so on and so forth. Our most challenging ride was Black Bottom. So Black Bottom is a neighborhood in Detroit, was a neighborhood in Detroit that was named after the dark soil, but then later became known for the predominance of African Americans living in the area. So Black Bottom doesn't exist anymore. It was a neighborhood that was completely razed in the 1960s during urban renewal to make way for a freeway. So we had to get really creative on facilitating Pedal to Porch in Black Bottom. So I worked with an architect who was able to scan thousands of pictures from the archives and create a panoramic view of the neighborhood in Black Bottom. So former residents were able to come in and say, that's my house, I used to live there. That was amazing. But we also created model porches of homes in Black Bottom, where we were able to pre-record the audio and then play it for the writers when they came up to the porch. And it was amazing because, you know, you see this porch and there's a grassy area right there, right? So it's just reinforcing the idea that a house used to live there. And even though the neighborhood is no longer there, the former residents and the stories still remain. And so we wanted to make sure to preserve their history. So I'd like to go back to why Pedal to Porch exists, right? To lower the barrier of connection between neighbors. So in a divided country, we need initiatives like Pedal to Porch to really drive connection. Strengthen the social fabric of communities. So for those neighborhoods that have very few homes and people feel socially isolated, it is a great opportunity to get one neighbor on one block to meet another neighbor, you know, 2 or 3 blocks away, and help them develop relationships so that they feel more connected and have some type of resources in the community. Challenge limited narratives of place. So wherever there is blank slate narrative, challenging that wherever it exists. And then finally, preserving history through storytelling. So holding on to those stories of old so that it can teach us something new. So in their own words, I'd love to let you hear what participants have to say about Pedal the Porch. Good? Back. This is real humans telling their real stories.
I knew that this neighborhood had awesome people. I knew that we had a really good story and good history.
Look around, you see the houses with little flowers, and I guess I want them to feel positive about where they live. And it's a hell of a lot better than the suburbs.
We shouldn't shy away from understanding the poverty and the things that affect our community, because it's one of the most important ways that we can come to conceptualize the systemic issues as they affect us directly.
It just gives them hope that we can do it, and we'll do it together.
This is awesome.
Something like this is great for filling in those gaps and for creating a whole story about narratives that kind of grew on their own.
I definitely feel more empowered walking away from it, or biking away.
1 second. All right, so a lot of people ask what's next. So I'd love to host Pedal the Porch in different areas in Philly. I'm also going to continue to follow up on invitations. We get at least 1 a week to host Pedal the Porch in different neighborhoods across the US. But then also I want to go deeper. I want to figure out how to create a physical manifestation of those stories, so again, that they live beyond what they were told. So I hope I've inspired you to either get to know your neighbors on a deeper level or host Pedal the Porch in your community. Thank you.